Hey guys, it's Matt here, and instead of reviewing the iPad Air 2 in 2021, let's review the iPad Air 1 in 2021. So here is the iPad Air 1. Now, unfortunately, you can see there's a bit of glare on the screen. Not much I can really do about that because these older iPad Airs really have glossy screens, so there's not much I can really do. But you can see I've got my iPad Air 1 right here, and it's fully up and running, configured, and working the way I want. How is it? Well, it's actually not as unusable as you might think it is. First of all, just a bit of backstory with this iPad. I ended up getting this iPad on eBay for around $70. It was actually like $69.99, I think, or something like that. I don't remember. It was listed fairly cheaply for what it was, so I went and ordered it, and it's exactly what I wanted it to be. It's in really good condition, and most importantly, and this is something I did want to experiment with, it is the cellular model iPad Air. I don't have a SIM card in it right now, but it does work with cellular. Anyways, moving right along, let's get to the system specifications. So first of all, this device has the A7 processor, which means it's more similar to like an iPhone 5S, which would make sense because this released a month after the iPhone 5S did. So it makes a lot of sense why it is super similar in that regard. It's got 1 gig of RAM, which is exactly the same as the iPhone 5S, and it's got 32 gigs of storage, which this could be configured from 16 to 128 gigs of storage from what I remember. Now, when it comes to iOS versions, this device only gets up to iOS 12.5.5. That is the latest version of iOS 12 that is out right now. Who knows if that will release another dot update eventually. I don't think that there are probably going to be any more, but Apple has surprised me before when I've said that, so maybe there will be. So with this iPad only running up to iOS 12, it's 3 versions behind the latest version of iOS. So how is it, per se? Well, it's actually pretty darn usable on 12. Now, if you saw one of the previous videos that I made, which was about using the iPhone 6 for a month, along with my iPad mini 2 and my Apple Watch Series 0, you would have noted that I said you probably shouldn't use one of these as a daily phone. And the same thing pretty much applies here as well. I wouldn't suggest that you go out and use one of these iPads as like a daily device. Maybe though, it would be different since iPads are usually like a secondary device for some people. And for me, this device has actually been doing everything I needed it to for an iPad, except for a few things, but that's why I have my main iPad. I got this specifically so I could bring this around instead of my phone and be able to use this thing instead of like a phone for a hotspot, because when I use my iPad 8th gen, with my iPad 8th generation, I usually bring this thing around if I need a newer iPad or something like that. But the problem with that is, this iPad is obviously not a cellular model, is what I mentioned earlier here. I could have bought this at a cellular model, but I did not have the money at the time to be able to buy this iPad with an Apple Pencil, which is definitely a necessity for what I needed for school. So I might have been able to buy the cellular iPad, but I didn't have the money to buy like an Apple Pencil with it, and I really do regret not buying a cellular model iPad. There are actually a few pluses to only being able to run iOS 12 on an iPad of this age. Well, first of all, iOS 12, like I mentioned, is still very much usable. The latest versions of YouTube, YouTube Studio, Audius, and Discord, the main apps I have in my dock, those all run on iOS 12, including Sweatcoin, but that's not working for me right now for some reason. I'll have to figure out why. There are a couple apps that don't run on here. I know Bandcamp does. SoundCloud requires 14, I think, at this point, but you can run the last compatible version on here, and it works perfectly fine. The eBay app requires 13, but the latest version or the last compatible version that runs on 12 works fine here as well. And if I go to my pages here, Reddit, the latest version I think works on here. Craigslist does as well. My Radar, which is like a radar application for weather, that works fine. Mac Tracker is another one. Steam and Twitch, I think, are both latest supported on 12. So a lot of the basic apps that I use are either fully supported on iOS 12 or the last compatible version runs on 12. So for me, it's actually quite perfect. Besides a bit of slowness, I'll get into that in a little bit. With an iPad running an older version of iOS like this, you can't expect everything to be perfect on it. So first of all, with this iPad in particular, let's open up the settings app here real quick. First of all, that didn't take very long to load, but what will have issues is multitasking. This iPad does actually support picture-in-picture, which means that if you go to like Safari to look up a YouTube video, or in the Twitch app, since that has picture-in-picture support, it will work on here perfectly like how a new device would be. I need to put my brightness down. This iPad does not support split view, but it does support slide over. Slide over is a thing where you can bring up an app from the side, and it will open up like that, just sitting on the side like that. And if I bring up like the YouTube app right here, you'll see it brings up the app here and then dims out the background. And if I tap the background, it'll just disappear. this iPad does not have any kind of multitasking support in that regard, since you can only run one app at a time. When the YouTube app is open, let's just say like the main view, and you bring up a slide over window, the video will not pause. It will stutter probably because it can't handle it very much, but it will not pause the video. So you can still have music playing or something in the background or a video and bring up a slide over window at the same time. So when it comes to multitasking, the Air 1 is not amazing in that regard, but it does work and it does enough for me since I use split view a lot, but when I'm using this iPad, I don't really have a need to. Now, something you might actually have noticed here in the settings, I don't know if it really is showing up that great because I lost my light for some reason. You might see right here, it says use side switch to lock rotation or mute. And yeah, that's right, the original iPad Air has a mute switch on the side of it. You can actually see that right here. There is a slide switch right there. This isn't the newest iPad to have this feature. I'm pretty sure the iPad Mini 3 is the newest one, since that actually has Touch ID as long as the side switch, and it also runs up to iOS 12 as well. With that side switch though, for instance, you can see if I open up my control center, there's no silent toggle here. All iPads after this have one here, or at least one that's optionally enabled. It didn't used to be. I know on iOS 12, if your device did not have a side switch, you had to have the bell toggle here and there was nothing you could do about it. Now you can move it around and even remove it yourself. I don't really see why you'd want to do that, but you can. So you can see here we've got our lock rotation right here. And if we switch that to use the switch for that, you can see now we have our mute button. I can tap this. Now we have our mute button sitting there instead, and our side switch will do our lock rotation. You can see that right there. Honestly, I don't exactly know why Apple got rid of the side switch on these iPads. Being able to mute the device with the switch is so handy. I don't know why they got rid of that, and it makes me really sad, but it's what they did, and it's not that hard to use a control center toggle for silent mode and rotation lock. Honestly, it's not really that big of a deal. If you do want a side switch, I guess this is an iPad that has it. Unfortunately, no iPads that are supported with iPadOS 15 have one of them, but again, not a big deal. This iPad is also running 12, as I mentioned earlier, so that means you don't get the app library. You don't get a lot of the newer features, like that one slide over feature where if you swipe up on it, you can see all the slide over windows. This does not exist on here. In fact, slide over on this is a pain in the butt sometimes. If you want to access slide over on one of these apps, let's say you want to bring up the App Store on the side while you have something in the background, you have to make sure that app is either A, in your dock, or B, in the recents area in the dock, which I have disabled because I've never liked that feature. I honestly find that stupidly annoying. They fixed that in iPadOS 15 because they now have the app library sitting right here. They have the app library at all. In fact, you can't even, there is no app library on this iPad. You can use that to open any app and slide over of your choice just by picking what's on the app library. Every app that you have installed on the device will show up there, so it makes it really easy. Now, when it comes to more modern features, what does this iPad have? Well, if you saw here earlier, the control center you access from the top corner. That was new in iOS 12. In fact, they actually added a lot of stuff in iOS 12 that they still have in modern versions of iPadOS today. So let's say you have an iPhone 10 or later, and you don't like using the home button. Well, you don't have to. You can use gestures like you can on newer versions of iPadOS, like 13, 14, 15. They started on 12, so if you want to use gestures, like I can swipe up and hold to access all of my recent applications. So that's really nice. Now let's do a bit of a speed test, why don't we? This iPad, I'm not expecting to have great results, so we're just gonna close everything and just see. You can see it's got the exact same interface when it comes to closing applications and stuff with that card view. I was introduced in 11, but it was made the way it is nowadays in 12, so there's that. So let's open up, I already did the settings app, we're just gonna do it again. And you can see, that's not terrible. It's not amazing. Like my main iPad could open that so much faster. In fact, my Air 2 could open that heaps faster than this Air 1 can, but it still opens pretty fast. Now, Apple actually said in iOS 12 that the camera app got a speed boost because on older iPhones like the 5S, on iOS 11, it was really slow. So let's see if that's actually true. Okay, yeah, that is so much faster, and that is honestly, oh, you can see me here, hello. That's honestly much better than it was before with iOS 11. So very good to see that they fixed that because that was really annoying how slow that was. Now let's open up, let's just say, another not so intensive app. Let's open Photos. You can see, open it fairly quickly, not a very intensive app. I don't really have that many images on here, but that's there and it works. One more app that I'm gonna open, I'm not gonna open a bunch of them because it's not that amazing, but we're gonna open up the App Store because that's an internet-based app. And you can see it's, oh, actually, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. That's actually really good. And you can see it's also got the new design of the App Store that we have in newer iPadOS today. So a lot of stuff that they added in iOS 11 that really hasn't changed that much since. Now, you can see here on this screen here, like the home screen, these app icons are pretty big, right? And yes, the app icons on the home screen are fairly big and oversized, at least in my opinion. This is how they always used to look before 13 came out and shrunk them. But it is still a bit weird looking to go back to this because this iPad here has like giant applications that take up a lot of space on here. You can only fit 20 per page, which they did change in later versions of iPadOS, and it looks a lot nicer. Now, how does this iPad actually handle opening iPhone apps? Now, this iPad was never designed to actually be able to have a keyboard installed, which newer iPads do, so they actually now in iPadOS 15, they now allow you to open iPhone apps in landscape mode, with the iPhone app being like a rectangle in the middle here. This does not. It only allows you to do it in portrait mode. Even if I shrink this down, it's not going to change that. So iPhone apps have to be in portrait. I'm not willing to rotate my device right now to make that work because it's not going to work. And finally, if you're curious about other kinds of support that this device has, it's very similar to the iPad Air 2. So since this has the A7 processor, that means you don't get the Measure app, which was introduced in 12. You don't get some of the other features like AR. Like, there's no AR on this device at all, even though they were really pushing that at that point in iOS 12. They were pushing AR quite heavily with the Measure app. This iPad also does not have any kind of Apple Pencil support, but will charge an Apple Pencil if you do plug one in. You just won't see the battery percentage on this iPad. You'll have to look on the iPad that it is paired to. It will not pair to this, and you can see nothing at all. Even if I plug this in, which it's plugged into my computer right now to charge, then it won't do anything. And one more thing to note with this iPad is actually a few little things that bother me that I actually went over in a really old video. You might be able to find it if you look through it. There'll be a link in the info card of a video that I made in the past that actually demonstrated this feature, or I don't know if it was a bug or not, but it was only on these older models. They actually changed the design of the status bar up here to mimic more of the iPhone X style, with the clock and stuff being up here and the battery, Wi-Fi, all that being up here. That was a 12 thing. Something that they did not change was the battery icon up here to match the iPhone Xs. Except they kind of did. You can see when I open the control center, the lightning symbol on the charger is now on top of the battery, and it actually stays that way when you close it until you let go of the device, and then it goes back to the old one, which looks really, really weird. I don't know why they did that. And this was a thing on only the older iPads that did not actually support iOS 13 or later, except 13 had actually not come out yet, so I was able to kind of make a prediction on that. So I was like, okay, any device that shows this instead of, I can get it to do it, instead of that for the battery icon is not going to get 13. Very weird guess, but I was actually correct. Yeah, I don't know why they did that. It's very strange, and honestly, it's very inconvenient as well, because when you're screen recording on these older iPads, it puts a red bar across the whole top. But if you're running an Air 2 with 12, it puts a dot right here. And we'll actually do that if you close this, it'll show the dot and then it'll just go back to the big bar. It's really strange. I don't know why Apple did that. And I know this is a small side tangent. That doesn't really matter, but whatever. You're watching a Matt's Tech video. I'm random. So yeah, with that being said, how would I rate this iPad in terms of its usability? Well, I'd say it's actually pretty decent. I would say if you still have one of these and you still are trucking along with it, I'd say keep going with it. In fact, the fun part about this too is that since I actually have a cellular model, this iPad still fully works with the cellular carriers because this is the first iPad to support 4G. Now, if you're wondering, well, the 5S, even though this supports 5G, even though this device supports 4G, it will not be getting support from carriers in the future. And the reason for that is the iPhone actually has a different role than the iPad does. Even though these both share the same cellular technology, or at least similar technology, this iPhone does not get any more support from carriers because if you're expected to make phone calls on one of these, this device still reaches out to 3G towers in order to make phone calls. The iPad Air would probably do the same if it could make phone calls or text messages. It can't do that. The iPad models only use cellular data. There's no texting or calling or whatever, and it's unfortunate. I wish it really had it, but and again, it saved this device from losing support with cellular carriers, so maybe it's not such a bad thing, at least on this iPad. So yeah, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a like and get subscribed if you like the content that you see on this channel. But before I go, I do have a challenge for myself, and this is not actually going to require any like goals. I'm going to do this because I'm genuinely curious. Can I use a cellular iPad for a week as my main device? It's honestly done everything my phone has needed to do, and it's been really convenient to have around. Other than that, that'll be it for this video. Expect this video to come out sometime soon about using this iPad for a week. Bye guys.